Let's just listen to a little bit of what Tim Cook said earlier about making the updates for this operating system easier.
Since we make updates easy and make them available to as many customers as possible, iOS 7 will quickly become the world's most popular mobile operating system. It's packed with amazing new features and a stunning new user interface.
That was a comment there, obviously, John, from the CEO, Tim Cook. So, John, stay with us. We want to bring in two more experts to join our conversation. Anand Srivastava with me now, senior analyst for Bloomberg Industries, and Paul Kudrowski with us from Palo Alto, Bloomberg contributing editor and venture investor with SK Ventures. Anand, this is great, because when you were going through the features, you were like, really, the fingerprint thing? This is the most important feature that they could focus on? What is your takeaway from that? I mean, we heard actually John talking about, okay, maybe you don't put in a code, but this is something that Apple seems really into for whatever reason.
No, I think the bigger change in strategy for us, I think, when we look at it from Bloomberg Industries' perspective, our handset and our component analyst perspective, is the bifurcation of a high-end and a mid-end phone. Obviously, they recognize Asia as a growing market. They want to have presence there. Android is really doing well there. Samsung is really doing well there. So they want to have a product that grows along with the market that is affordable for that industry.
Yeah, which often gets lost here because in North America, particularly in the US, Apple has just clear dominance, but everywhere else in the world, Android phones are by far ahead.
Absolutely. And the subsidies are a big part of that. And obviously, when you undo the subsidies that you get through your carrier and you X out the contract, you pay a much higher price product for the product. So when you have a lower priced product for the Asian market, the fact that they have now two platforms, one is the highest end flagship product and one is sort of the second tier, if you want to call it that. The flagship product has some incremental advancements with the iPhone 5S, slightly better camera, better processor, the fingerprint sensor, the fact that 60% of users, like John Erlichman said, don't have a passcode for their phone is somewhat troubling, and the fact that the fingerprint sensor can help in that regard is a good thing. So, you know, with that comes security concerns, Big Brother, what are they going to do with my fingerprint? All of those questions have to be addressed. On the lower end, it's a great phone, and it's arguably a good enough product at a great price, perhaps. So,
okay, I'm glad you said price, because I want to bring in Paul Kudrowski on this. So, Paul, I'm just reading some of the headlines that are crossing here now. So iPhone 5S to cost $199 to $399 with a 2-year contract. I know the other model is slightly cheaper as far as the 2-year contract goes, but is this really low cost?
You know, no, it's not, obviously. I mean, it depends on your definition of low cost. But no, the 5C isn't low cost. And more importantly, it's not truly low cost until you see what the unsubsidized price is. Because, you know, in many markets around the world, there isn't the same model as there is in the U.S., where you get a highly subsidized price in exchange for a 2-year contract or whatever length contract. So the true price of the product in other markets will be very interesting. You know, there's some speculation it'll probably be closer to $300 or more in China, which is better than what iPhone class products were selling for in the past, but is cheap and no one's reckoning.
So you mentioned China. What do you make, Paul, if anything, of the fact that this was simulcast in Beijing, in Tokyo, and in Berlin?
It's hugely important. I don't know about the Berlin part. Maybe that's the colors. But China is hugely important, obviously, because there was that mysterious news in the last quarter where Apple was even, you know, confessed to being somewhat surprised at a slight contraction in its unit sales in the Chinese market, and that it comes as no surprise to anyone who's seen what's selling outside of Beijing and Shanghai in the rest of China, which is, you know, low-priced smartphone or even feature phone products. And so Apple had to have a competitive product there, because the risk was, you know, people kind of adopt a product family and grow with it. They adopt a Samsung family and grow with it. And Apple didn't want that to happen. They had to have, you know, what I've been calling sort of a gateway drug into their own smartphone product line, and this is it.
All right, John, I want to bring you back in on this point about plastic. So I was obviously going through Twitter, and somebody that I like to follow a lot said, great, Apple's taken technology that's been available for about 70 years and now just pumping it back out, and we're asking, how much do we pay? What are your sources telling you about this?
Well, you know, speaking of Twitter, the first thing I want to say is I fear how fast Paul Kudrowski is going to be tweeting with this speedier processor on the new high-end iPhone.
Yeah, a fair concern indeed.
You know, I think the reality is that today the largest seller of smartphones on the planet is Samsung. Samsung is a company that has been relentless in its aggressive marketing approach, in its willingness to tailor phones and devices to carriers and consumers. We didn't talk today about new screen sizes for Apple, and yet Samsung is very happy to have those conversations. Not only those conversations about phones and tablets and phablets of all sizes, but last week, of course, unveiling a smartwatch. So, you know, from Apple's perspective, and I talked with Paul about this. I mean, we're not talking about them unveiling a phone that, without any contracts, that costs $100 or $150. There is lots of competition in the Chinese market right now. Apple has a lot of market share opportunity, and at the end of the day, the pricing changes are very much about that story.
About that story, and of course, John, you and I have been talking a lot about this larger picture of Apple versus Samsung.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, the reality is that there are something like 140 million smartphone users in the United States and 1.4 billion around the globe. So if you're Apple and you have probably, not necessarily for sure, but probably put an iPhone in the hands of most American consumers that immediately want one, you find yourself thinking, well, where do we take this story next? And I think one of the big quotes that Tim Cook shared today was something like, you know, as part of what we're doing, the market has become so large that we're going to replace the existing iPhone with not one but two new designs. So take it, you know, there are some people that said Apple should have done this a long time ago, but Apple clearly positioning this as, hey, the market story has changed. Samsung obviously has their positioning. Here's what we're going to do.